There. Good morning on this very snowy Wednesday morning. The commission will meet by Zoom only today. We do have a couple of people visiting us, I see. Mr. Tibbetts from from our county executive's office. Thank you. I will acknowledge the existence of a quorum here. We've got, I think, everybody with us this morning. Maybe we're a short one, I think, but we got a quorum. So let the minutes reflect the names of those members who are present. We circulated the draft agenda. Do I have anybody who wants to make any changes to the agenda?
Nope.
Okay, not hearing any requests for changes. We will consider the agenda as circulated, adopted by unanimous consent. We did circulate also the minutes of the January 8th meeting. Do we have anybody with any suggested changes to the minutes? I don't have any myself.
They look accurate.
Okay, not hearing any requests for changes to the minutes, we will consider those adopted by unanimous consent. Okay, so let me go to the first item, and that is a report on our outreach efforts. I think, reported at our last meeting that I had reached out to the 5 citizens advisory boards around the county. Shortly after our last meeting, I actually I heard back from 2 of them. And they asked me to, if I would have a conference call. One of them was a chair, one of them was a vice chair acting on behalf of a chair. And so I did that. We scheduled a conference call and had that on, it was January 13th. It was the Mid-County Citizens Advisory Board and the Up-County Citizens Advisory Board were the 2 boards. Crystal Bivens is from the Up-County and Serge Thomas is from the Mid-County. He's the vice chair. So I gave them sort of a whole rundown of what we do, what we've been working on, the topics we're looking at, and made it clear that we wanted to hear input from them, not just on topics we might already be working on, but also on anything they thought we should be looking at. They said they would take that information. They were pleased to hear, but they really didn't have much background in it. They would take it back to their full boards and see what kind of responses they got and what they wanted to take as the next step. And then there was a follow-up. I heard from the Mid-County vice chair and actually also the chair, and they were eager to have us attend their next meeting, which is in March. And the date, I think I circulated on the agenda, it's March 20th. It's by Zoom, it's 7 p.m. I followed up after that to clarify whether or not they thought at that time they would be prepared to make any sort of a presentation to us or to discuss issues where we would be sort of in the mode of a listening session. And they said, absolutely not. Actually, this was for us to sort of make our sort of a similar type of presentation that I made with them, sort of just to give them the background on what we were doing and what the issues were. And then they would, after that, take it under advisement and get back to us if they had comments or things they wanted to raise. So it's sort of going to be, I think, a reprise of what I did on the phone before. However, they made it clear we were all welcome to attend. They were glad to have any and all of us. So when I get I assume I'll get a Zoom link from them sometime in early March. When I get that, I will circulate it. And then if we have at our next meeting, I still haven't circulated, you all could remind me that I haven't done that. And then we should be good to go for March 20th at 7 p.m.
Jim,
any questions?
Yes, Mid-County takes in about what area of Montgomery County?
It's been a long time since I've seen a map. Anybody have a better answer than mine? I don't want to guess. I mean, I could start guessing from my visual of the map, but I'm not.
Sure.
Term of art.
Okay.
What's a term of art? Well, I mean,
it's not critical. Yeah, just was curious.
Up County tends to be Germantown and
right.
beyond.
That's me.
Yep. Try and guess those.
Gaithersburg, right?
And I'm
Jim,
kind of down county here, west.
Jim Dale here.
Yep.
Up County
Yeah, Dale?
includes Germantown,
Oh,
Gaithersburg.
good.
The Mid County is Wheaton up through Albany
Right.
Okay.
and Burtonsville.
Okay.
Oh,
Thanks, Dale. Thanks.
Burtonsburg. Okay. So we can move on to the next topic. All right. As you will recall, we were supposed to have a speaker for this morning and to talk about the funding of the Office of People's Counsel. Our representative is going to be the president of the Montgomery County Citizens Civic Federation, which is a federation of, I don't know, about 40 or so neighborhood associations and civic groups. And they tell me they represent probably 25, 30 some thousand households in terms of who their members are. Individuals don't belong, the actual civic groups belong, and then their members are that numerous. Her name's Cheryl Gannon, and she got back to me last week. We had a long conversation. She's not comfortable coming and making her presentation because she really, the Civic Federation has a very long history with this issue. And they are very much certain that the county's civic residents would be far better off with a People's Counsel, a fully staffed office. And they have a lot of cogent arguments that they've made in writing, in op-eds and other places. But she did some additional research, and she was reminded when she did the research of a court case that was dated as far back as 1973. And after looking sort of at the history of the law and the court case, she decided really she wanted to be generous, and she didn't think she should waste our time. She really feels that they would be really not using our time wisely if they brought this to us as a charter issue. There's a particular court case that involved Prince George's County. And in that case, her view was the court she thought they made it clear that, under state law, that the General Assembly has enacted statutes that give Montgomery County and Prince George's County zoning authority and legislative authority. And that the court case made it clear that there is no authority that's residual beyond that the county has used that authority. We have zoning laws. We have an Office of People's Counsel. Prince George's has something similar, although I think their People's Counsel has more authority because they got a second statute enacted to give it greater authority. They actually go into zoning hearings and represent individuals. But as far as the court case was concerned, she read it as a firm decision that all of the authority that's been legislated by the state has been and is to be exercised by the council, and that land use matters are not matters that are appropriate for the charter, barring enactment of some other state legislation that would allow it. And so she just thought that, given that they will pursue the issue, they'll continue to be advocates, but they feel that it's really a political issue, that it warrants them looking for a political solution through our county executive or through our council, whatever the issue is in terms of budgeting or changing the law. And she didn't really feel it was appropriate to come back here and lobby us as if it was a charter matter, because she really didn't think we would be within bounds of our jurisdiction to do that. So that's how we left it. So she will not be joining us. I think that leaves for us the decision as to whether or not we have any members who want to be advocates for this issue in some way. And I am open to this, Dale, which is that allowing our county executive to come back or send his designee to argue for why this commission should be advocates on this issue. I didn't want to close the door because that is Cheryl's view in her reading of the law, but I just wanted to leave it open. So I will ask first our commissioners whether we have folks that are interested in advocating on this. And the other thing is, should we request our county executive to come back as his designee to give him one more shot at that, asking us to look.
I'm not in favor
sorry,
of
I
us
didn't catch
pursuing
that.
it. It's Jeff.
Okay.
I'm not in favor necessarily of us pursuing it, but I don't have a problem with inviting the executive or his designee to come lobby us to see why we should.
Dale, do you have any feelings on whether your office wants to continue pursuing this? I know it's an issue that Mark Alrich feels strongly about, and I know that there have been repeated attempts to get an item in the budget for it. So I don't want to shut down the debate if he wants another opportunity.
I will present it to the executive. I mean, I'm not going to say no that he doesn't want to, but with the civic feds backing out of it, which is that they had been the champion of it, then let me see if it is indeed worthwhile, and if we can come up with a justification that really does put it back in as an issue for the charter. But I'm not speaking for the executive right now.
And I will tell you, as long as we're on the topic of the county executive, I'm officially inviting him to come back and present anything he wants to us. He was one of our very first meeting attendees when we started in 2023, and we're now to 2025. And if he would like an opportunity to come back and raise all new issues or talk about something we already have on our plate, that's fine. He has an invitation. We're glad to schedule it for, not sure March. I'm not quite sure where we are in March yet, but April, May, whenever he wants. So let him know and just get back to me.
I will. Thank you.
Since he's now
Yeah,
term
no
limited, he
problem.
might want to join the commission the next time it's possible.
All right, special taxing districts. This is one of our ongoing topics. We have a working group. We have a de facto or official leader of the working group, and Mike Hirsch. I'm going to turn it over to Mike and let him give us an
Yeah, thanks, Jim. I'm really glad to hear Dale is on the call this morning. Hello, Dale. Since you guys are working on the budget, I guess the operating budget is going to be released in March, the middle of March. I echo what Jim was saying, to invite the county executive to come to one of our sessions, and the time frame of April or May, since we have time to put together a report for 26, the commission's report for 26, recommending whatever budget charter amendments we might be coming up with. But the time frame this year, April or May, will give us some time to look over the budget, and maybe there'd be a fruitful discussion with the county executive, more fruitful discussion with the county executive at that time. So to come back to the special taxing districts, as you know, there's a number of special taxing districts that are already in place in Montgomery County. Some are more active than others. Some in existence. Some have fallen inactive or not in existence. For example, the White Flint Special Taxing District, Battery Park, Friendship Heights Recreation District. And in our review of the charter, I know some of this is material that you already know, but I'm kind of directing it to you, Dale, this conversation, just to kind of, because we haven't, as a commission, we haven't had an opportunity to talk, with you as an official of the county executive. Anyway, so we clearly special taxing districts are in existence in Montgomery County. However, when we look at the charter, there's no mention of special taxing districts. It's something presumed, I guess, or implicit in the budgeting process that budgets are created, that cover the revenues and expenses associated with the special taxing districts, but it's not clear in the budget that's available to the public, and certainly it's not in the charter. Now, having said that, we've done some research. For example, Prince George's County has a whole section on special taxing districts. It's Division 14 of their charter, Section 10, 269, and it clearly covers how special taxing districts are created in Prince George's County and how they're handled, how revenues are budgeted, limitations, how the public is involved. And then Anne Arundel County has something similar. Now clearly, in our review of what the county executive, but of course, this is public information, so we haven't had an opportunity to talk to, get feedback from him directly, but he's clearly talking about, quote unquote, a kind of a restructuring of the budget, which might rely more on special taxing districts, similar to what is being used in, for example, Northern Virginia, to do a lot of development, help the economy, and do things that are clearly beneficial that the public can see. So there's, no one likes extra taxes, but when you can actually see taxes being used to build metro stops and widen highways or make the highways more beautiful and safer, then the public might be more, willing to give a few more pennies on their property tax or however the taxes are delivered in order to benefit by that infrastructure. So I think the executive, from my just looking at his virtual meetings that are posted, is kind of tapping into that feeling. And I think there's parts of Montgomery County that would benefit by that. So I'm coming to the chase here. So at the same time, in parallel, we've been told through the council, directly and indirectly, that the council is really not interested unless the state, Maryland State, gives them the authority to create a special taxing district, which, okay, anyway, accepting that, in reviewing the bills before the legislature this year in Maryland, there's at least 3 bills that, and I'm by no means a lawyer, but I can read and I can understand, I believe. There's HB 23, there's HB 80, and there's Senate Bill 190 that perhaps the executive is already familiar with and maybe is the driver behind. But the Maryland legislature appears to be giving more local control to the counties to create these special taxing districts, maybe to fill some of the budget gaps that the state is encountering this year. So I think, and I'll end this in my conversation, my discussion by saying this. I think it would be appropriate for the Charter Commission, for us, to propose a charter amendment in 2026. This is my hypothesis, okay? That it would be appropriate for the Charter Commission to kind of jump on the train, if you will, to create a charter amendment that would, I'm proposing, as I did back in September, a new section 317 of the Montgomery County Charter that would cover special taxing districts in Montgomery County. That's section 317. It's a new section in the charter to be a kind of, if you will, enabling legislation in Maryland and Montgomery County to deal with special taxing districts, to bring it into light, which is right now kind of being implied and not in the public. So that's my hypothesis. I would like to kind of get your sense of this, maybe now, not maybe if not now, but I'd like to, get a sense of, would our actions be helpful? Is this something that might be, could be useful to the executive? And then, of course, we have to double back to the council to see how, what their feelings are, as we all know. So thank you. Any comments would be appreciated.
Yeah, I just have a question. Since we have special taxing districts, why do we need a charter amendment to have special taxing districts?
Well, at this point, we have the charter is again silent on it, and there's other parts of the chart. You could, I guess, ask the same question. There's other parts of the charter that cover like the chief administrative officer or reorganization of the executive branch, aspects of the budget in fine detail, and certainly this would be a way for the governing document of the county to describe how the county would budget for special taxing districts. So that,
yeah, I guess
right now, if you would look at it the other way, there's no authority in the charter to have special taxing districts. So you could say that, from the opposite standpoint, since there's no authority in the charter that discusses special taxing districts, then there's no standing. Then they are outside the budget. They are, we use the word, with some apprehension, but then they're quote unquote inappropriate. Do you see what I mean?
oh, sure. I guess my concern in making any changes to the charter about this is accountability. I mean, right now, we do have accountability. That is, people can vote thumbs up or thumbs down for those public officials who enact taxes to a certain level or not. And I guess I would be concerned in making any changes that we be very careful not to remove accountability for the actions taken, which we have now. So I guess I don't see the reason for it, but I'm open to argument.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean, so I'm gonna make some suggestions about how to proceed with this, but I'm the lawyer in me is sort of like, if you came to me as a client, I would say, well, let me ask you this, Mike. Here we have the General Assembly has enacted a statute, and that statute is a grant of authority to your council to have special taxing districts with, I assume, some limitations and constraints, right? And if you're in the business of trying to summarize that authority to put it into a charter amendment, you have to be sure that when you've restated that state's authority, that you haven't in some way either narrowed it unintentionally or overstated it, right? I mean, you're in the business of trying to essentially restate or at least codify what this grant of authority is in prior legislation. And so the risk is that you have put into your charter something that represents less than all the authority that the state has granted the county, which you would not want to do, I presume. Or that you have overstated that authority in some way, or at least generalized it in a way that leads it to being, overstated, right? And the answer is this: what was the bang for your buck in trying to sort of reformulate, restate, or reformat what the state legislature has put in its grant of authority to the council?
Right. I think that's well said. I think, we may not need it, but if we ever need it, we'll have it. I guess that sort of thing. But I guess my question is, do we need it? And I'm not sure I understand any answer to that. Why do we have to go down this road at all?
Well, again, I'll take one more stab at it. If you look at the budget sections in the charter, section 303, for an example, it talks about capital and operating budgets.
Right.
And it gives in some detail instructions to the county executive as to what should be included in their in his submission to the council. And it tells the county executive what dates to submit. January 15th for the capital budget, March 15th for the operating budget. There's no mention of, and it's again in some detail, there's no mention of special taxing districts. Special taxing districts, however, constitute a significant revenue and expenditure amounts, and are proposed to be even greater sources of revenue and expenditures if the state is pushing that authority down to the county for major infrastructure projects. So my contention, I guess, is that it's a, if you will, right now, it's a silent off budget type of item. And if the authority is newly granted to the council to create more special taxing districts, and this is something new that's coming up in the next year or two, then it's the prime time for the charter to not be silent about them, which leaves it in kind of a gray area. Are they legitimate or are they not legitimate? Because there's no mention in the charter for it, where other counties have mentioned it. So now 26 would be a perfectly good time to, in conjunction with the state granting the county more authority with respect to special taxing districts, update the charter to be consistent with that process.
All right, Mike. So what I'm hearing, I think, is I think you've refined the question, and that it's not that a charter amendment would try to either change, affect, or restate the authority itself. Is you're looking to find out whether or not there is some aspect of how the county uses that authority that should be we don't have a provision in the charter which explains how the county goes about procedurally exercising the authority. That you're saying that the county could benefit if the procedure itself for how it's used and how that procedure fits into the regular budget procedure was
Yes,
sort of elaborated.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
We don't want to limit, as you've been pointing out, we don't want to limit the county, give it less authority. It could be a very general provision in the charter, but at least to recognize the fact that there are these special taxing districts. Now, I'm not a political person, but I understand that there's that there's a political aspect to this, and so and this would be certainly something to discuss with the council and perhaps the county executive.
Can I make a suggestion then? And I don't know, what's on your plate for the next few weeks, but would you be willing to use some of your time between now and next meeting to have just to see if you could have a phone call with our council's executive director, Craig? I think he was very helpful the last time you contacted him last year on a different issue. To see if you could have a back and forth with him and sort of find out from him in terms of whether or not there is sort of I don't know what's the word, protocol, whether there's a protocol now for how special taxing districts and the use of them fits within the stated budget process in the charter, and whether or not there is a different process or a separate process that is not in the charter but could be stated there that they currently use, or whether they're in need of some sort of a process change. I mean, could you have that conversation with him, and then you could come back and sort of give us the lay of the land on that? And if you want me to join you, I'd be glad to do it. That's up to you, or anybody else for that matter. But
Yes, affirmative, yes. And if the, Dylan or David or whoever would like to join, we could expand it for sure. Yeah, next week if he's available.
I mean, then I think you'd have sort of a firm idea of whether or not that there is a process issue or it's sort of an unstated rule that would be worth stating, or whether or not it just would be, they would view it as just additional constraints on their process that they don't want to read.
Yes, yes. The last year we had a very productive conversation with them. Yes.
Okay, and then Dale, if there's somebody on the county executive side that deals with budget issues, you think it would be worth having a conversation with that person, or maybe it's you. We could also do that.
Okay, I will find the appropriate person. It may be the chief administrative officer. He's the one who introduced in legislation transportation special taxing district. So he could be an appropriate resource, and I'll be interested in seeing why Prince George's and other counties felt compelled or have that provision in their charters, and what it says about special taxing districts in their charters.
Could I?
Dale, was that House Bill 80 that he introduced or is championing? Do you happen to know was it HB 80?
I am unsure which one it is. I know that we are tracking the legislation right now for the establishment.
It's House Bill 23.
House Bill 23. Okay,
23.
thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, Dale, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No,
you.
no,
Christine
I
Mullins,
appreciate.
Yeah, that was the one that the council just discussed at its most recent legislative meeting, and we were told by Mel Wenger that the county executive, publicly supported House Bill 23. So that seems to be the vehicle.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Are you tracking HB 80 and Senate Bill 190 as well? Just a question. If you are, or maybe you could look at those, and any comments about those would be appreciated.
I'm happy. This is Christine again. I'm happy to ask the Office of Legislative Oversight. I'm not familiar with the other ones. I don't think those have been brought to the council, but happy to follow up. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
And through the intergovernmental relations that both the executive and the council work through, that would be the appropriate spot that Christine just mentioned.
And Mike, this is Marvin. Since you had provided us a copy of that for today, I was wondering, because I had a chance to look through it and I saw reference to county special taxing districts. So is that a part of, did you send it to us for the purpose of kind of looking at it as something that other counties are thinking of utilizing?
Yes. Yeah, and that the Maryland legislature is giving counties more special taxing district authority. That's what seems to be in the hopper this year.
Okay.
I think in layman's parlance, at least from the standpoint of public communications and political discourse, I've heard it expressed not so much as special taxing districts, but as the ability to distinguish in rate setting between different classes of real estate, right? So that they're not required to apply the same, tax rate to all parcels of land, whether they're depending, whether they're residential or commercial. So.
Could I make a point about section 110 of the charter, which is the exercise of zoning, planning, and other powers? And it says, in the exercise of powers authorized by any act of the General Assembly or the Constitution, the council shall follow the procedures set forth in such law or section of the Constitution, and the exercise thereof shall be effected in the manner prescribed therein. So the charter says we're going to follow whatever the state law requires us to do. We don't have to state any additional authority to implement a state law. I think we're covered just with that broad grant of authority.
Okay, so I think the timing works. If we could get sort of some greater refinement on the question and the need for the issue to be considered, if we can do that before our March meeting, the advantage is that our March meeting is on the 12th. We will be able to have a better handle from that discussion on the 12th and determine whether or not this really is an issue we want to bring before citizen advisory boards, at least the first one when we meet with them on March 20th. We will have a better handle on whether that's something we really want to raise with them or not, I think. So it'd be helpful to get the clarity at our March 12th meeting. All right, anything else, Michael, you want to go forward on that topic?
No, thanks. No, not today.
Okay. All right, the next topic, budgetary reserves, budget surplus. I'm going to turn it over to Jeff. I'm trying to remember where we left off on this topic, but
So I think we left off that we're going to try and get somebody from the county to talk to us about whether there's a policy that they follow or how they get to a reserve amount, because it's not what's necessarily in the charter. It's more fluctuating.
We had heard that the amount they have
far exceeds it.
It's much larger than the cap that's stated in the charter.
Yeah, and while we were having this previous discussion here, I was thinking about Dale's question about why do we need it, and I think the answer is different for the budget reserve number, because I think that it becomes a political football, and you can have an administration that comes in and wipes out reserves, and then the next administration comes in, doesn't have reserves, and then a disaster hits, and then you're stuck because they didn't do what they needed to do. So to me, that's why you would want to have it in the charter, is to make sure that there's no question about what kind of reserves you're supposed to be maintaining. But I don't have anything to add other than that to the information I've already provided. I think we do need to talk to the county's budget people and see what their process is or how they come up with what they come up with.
All right, so this is a question for staff. So if there's a need to reach out to the executive director's office or specific individuals on staff, and we're going to do this on special taxing districts as well as budgetary. The question is do we want to go to them twice for two different topics and bother them twice, or do we want to somehow consolidate this into one
meeting and have one meeting, two issues on the agenda? That's all.
Yeah.
Can
you guys sort of work together to do that?
Jim, I have a question or something that I think might be kept in mind here, and that is bond counsel.
Okay.
Maybe we should have a bond counsel involved in this in terms of the AAA bond rating or our bond extent to which having, say, 5% reserves or whatever the number may be would be consistent with having a AAA bond rating.
I'm okay with that. I agree with Dale. That's another reason why you want to have reserves, to maintain that. So
So let me ask you, this is either for Christine or for Stephen. How much coordination do you want to do in terms of figuring out who to talk to and when?
This is Christine. I did give a heads up to both, Craig Howard and also, Tricia Swanson in the county executive's office about, this discussion and that we need to identify some folks. I think, giving, at least a month's notice in terms of, or a few weeks' notice in terms of like, okay, the charter review wants to discuss this at their next meeting on next date, and I'm sure we can identify the folks to attend. I think the only complication might be, if we need to have, Dale can speak to this better than I can, but for example, if we need to have like Mike Covey, the director of finance there, and he's not available on a certain date, we might have to, make some adjustments, but I think maybe if you identify the date that you want folks, county staff to be able to discuss this with you, and then we can just work from there in terms of getting it the appropriate people and getting it on their calendars. But maybe maybe with like a choice of 2 dates. I don't know if Dale
Right.
has any thoughts on this too, because it involves folks on the county executive side as well. I know everybody's really busy.
Yeah, they will be particularly busy up through March 17th. Normally it would be the 15th, but that's on a weekend. But I can ask, and I missed the previous discussion about this issue. The general policy has been 10%. That we got that not because it's anything from within the county. It came from the rating agency said you should. We were always below that, and you said you should get your reserves up to 10%, and if you want to keep your AAA bond rating, and the county had a very deliberate effort over many years in order to gradually increase it, and then for a few years the revenue estimating wasn't as precise and it went over. But then, the executive will propose his budget with a target reserve number. And as you know, that at the end of the day, it is the council that makes the final decision on the budget and how much of that budget is in reserves.
Dale, I asked this question at the last meeting, and I just sort of made an assumption without really pushing to try to figure out the answer. But since the charter has a cap that's lower than 10%, is that finessed through putting your surplus in different funds? Because the charter only deals with the general fund. Do they put the amount between the cap and the 10% just somewhere else?
I don't know. That'll be a Mike Covey question.
Because what I thought was, if there's some need to liberalize the charter so that the cap doesn't apply to one particular, in other words, if there's a way to make it just simpler so that people are going, well, to comply with the 5, we have to put it here, we got to put it there. Someone says, well, simplify that, and we're going to have a higher than 5%, so let's not have a charter that has a 5% number we don't actually use, and we have to move money around to make it work. Just somehow fix it to make it work.
And I don't have a problem putting language in the charter that says that, that the goal is to maintain the AAA bond rating too. I mean, that's a valid goal for what we're trying to do here.
In other words, you would say maybe you don't tie it to a number, you just try it to a goal.
Is the charter the right place to be setting political goals? That doesn't seem like, that seems a bit
well, but the reserves
charter
are more than just political, though. I mean, the reserves are designed to protect the
reserves
county.
are, but the goal of having a AAA bond rating is a political issue, not a constitutional issue per se.
It's a
constitutional issue.
best practice. But...
Right. Not that any. I'm not saying it's not a positive goal. I'm just saying I'm not sure that the constitution of the county is the appropriate place for something of that nature.
don't feel strongly one way or another, but I do think that we need to be consistent in what we're trying to do with our reserves. And I think the charter is the right place to do it so that it doesn't fluctuate every time somebody changes.
Section 10, or section 310 says the county may accumulate earned surplus in any enterprise fund or unappropriated surplus in any other fund.
Mm-hmm.
With respect to the general fund, there's a 5% cap, but there's no
Right.
cap on any other fund. So it seems like we're covered. They can have any other number of other unappropriated
But you
funds.
can't take water funds in theory. You cannot take water funds in theory to cover the cost of a new county roof because it got destroyed in a storm. In theory, you should not be able to do that. And so the reason that you have general fund reserves is to cover general fund kinds of expenses. Likewise, if you have see, and I came from Florida, right, where we had hurricanes that would wipe out, infrastructure. But if you have something that wipes out all of your data, for example, you can't take that out of the water fund. That's got to come out of your general fund or some fund. It's not the general fund has to have its own reserves that are sufficient to cover general fund kinds of expenses. And the other funds are unlimited because you can build up as much reserves as you make money in them. If you make money in your water and sewer, and you make money in your water and sewer, and you build up those reserves.
Well, the other part of the section 310 says an unappropriated surplus may be used to fund any supplemental or special appropriations. So if one has an unappropriated surplus fund with that name, then you can use it for anything. I think it'd be instructive for us to know how many funds there are that are reserve funds maintained by the county. So that would be a question to ask the finance people when we meet with them.
And Jeff, perhaps the issue that you're getting at is that there's a cap on the surplus in the general fund,
Mm-hmm.
rather than a floor. So, so if your own, in other words, the charter implies that you're only allowed to have 5%, whereas
Correct.
that seems unnecessarily restrictive in light of the AAA bond agencies or the bonding agencies saying you should be going up to 10%. And somebody must have dealt with this already because they have been pushing up to 10%. So that's where talking to the finance people probably makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
So do we now have an informal committee of Jeff, Mike, and Christine to work out with our finance staff and budget staff some sort of either a meeting or series of meetings off the record for purposes of education of our commissioners? Is that the appropriate subcommittee, or do we have anybody else who wants to participate in it?
Yeah, I think you're going to add David and Dylan, right?
Yeah, I'm interested in participating in that just for the, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just trying to sort of just for scheduling purposes, just so we can coordinate calendars and just get it. Okay. All right. Thank you. Anything else on this topic? Do we want to talk about? Anybody else have anything they want to raise?
Nope.
Okay, the next topic on our agenda is solicitation of public comments. As you'll recall, we solicited public comments in general back in November of 2023 in anticipation that we would get enough comments to go forward and have a public listening session afterwards. We didn't get much. I think at the time we might have gotten only 1 or 2 written comments. But I was thinking that if we're going to do that, it's time to do it again. If we solicit public comments now, we'll have an opportunity to receive something maybe during the spring or early summer, and then we'll know whether we have any input that would be worth pursuing and studying as we go through the fall and next winter. So I took the liberty of using the November 2023 notice and redrafting it to something that could be issued either this month or next month. I know I didn't circulate that very far in advance because it was last night by the time I put pencil to paper, as if I'm still using paper, right? So I did circulate that. If folks want a chance to review it, because I know you didn't have it, you can certainly do that and then just send me your comments by email in the next couple of days. But let me just first ask, do we have a consensus that it is time to solicit public comments again?
I'm in favor.
Yes, affirmative, and we could do it multiple times. So, we could do it again.
And that,
6 months.
Well, I mean, it's an open comment period. It would, we don't really close the comment period. It's basically perpetual. It's an open comment process. It's really about how many times you press release it. And that I beg the indulgence of our council staff, or the ones that have to press release it and deciding how many times they want to do that. But all right. I hear any not objections, but suggestions for changes or changing the time. I will look forward if you folks have any suggestions or changes or edits, let me know in the next week or so. We can ask staff if we can issue it after that, and so we'll get it on the record at some point in February.
Yeah, Jim. I see the question. Other methods. I'm thinking about some committee that I'm on, and being composed of primarily millennials and so forth. I'm thinking text. If we haven't utilized that particular method, that we probably should. Maybe we did before. I don't recall, but not to overlook it just because I think that's people seem to go right to that as opposed to any other form, especially in it sort of seems to substitute for email. Put it that way.
So I would have to rely on Christine and Stephen to tell me, or any other staff who's on here, whether or not the county has a text messaging system, whether they have a subscriber list for issuing county press releases via text notice of some sort. Do you do that?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I could reach out to the LIO office and determine if they do have that.
When people subscribe, I know you have an email subscription list. People subscribe to receive emails about new press releases, right?
Yeah, and my guess would be that they would not have a text one since they have the email one, but I can check.
Yeah, I mean that's a different authorization process to get people to give you their cell phone so that you push out an alert.
Right.
The text messages are generally short. There's not a lot of information, that it'd be more likely that the text message would be sending a link to a web page where the press release sits, and that's
right.
People would have to follow the link to see the press release in its entirety.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up, Dave, because I think that's exactly what I was thinking of. Yeah, we'd look at the short message, and then it would link to the longer communication.
Jim, could I just make a request in terms of the members communicating back to you about the press release? Could you please be sure to do that? Just reply directly to Jim so that you're not accidentally creating, an electronic meeting. Thank you.
Yeah, I pushed it out as an attachment to an email, so you could just hit reply rather than reply to all, and then that would work. And then actually the other thing you can do, I mean, the way I signed up for being on the county email subscription list is just on whatever there's a county page where you register what your subscriptions are, what you want them to send you emails about. And there's either a place on there to put your phone number in and ask for text instead of an email or not. I mean, it's just, I've never seen a place to put in that phone. All right. So we'll go forward with that. Let me just talk for a second about our next meeting. We have, just for folks' edification here, we have an outstanding invitation to our council president, Kate Stewart. There's been some back and forth since the end of last year. I understand that to some point she probably will. Just we don't have a firm date, and we're not absolutely certain that it's going to be March. We're still waiting to hear from her scheduling staff as to whether or not she wants to join us in March or some other time. So that's kind of open-ended. And then we have the invitation we just extended to the county executive. So March, we may have one or two of those. And then I guess we will hear back from Jeff and Mike whether or not we will be ready to hear from any of the staff on these budget or tax issues in March, or whether that waits till April or May. So I will wait to hear from you folks before I put the agenda for the next meeting together as to where we are in that process and what the progress is. This is the time we normally open it up for any comments, reminders, or information staff wants to provide us. So let me turn it over to Christine or Stephen to see if there's any requests or remarks. I know you're not going to tell us to get our reimbursement forms in for travel, since none of us have been traveling since the year started, but
I have been out for a little bit, so if you do have anything back for the last couple of months, please send it to me or bring it to the next meeting and I can get it processed.
so
I don't have any. I'm sorry.
Now, just remind me if we have deadlines. 'Cause I know there used to be some deadline I forgot about, but I know in my case, I haven't put any reimbursement forms in since last May or June. I don't know. Are we bumping up at some sort of a requirement for getting stuff in?
It's generally quarterly is best practice. They can process within the fiscal year, so I think that's June to June 30th or July 1 to June 30th. But yeah, quarterly is definitely best practice to get everything in. It makes it easier on our like accounts payable end to process. But if you have back stuff, just send me everything, and if there's for some reason we can't process it, I'll let you know. But we can obviously try.
I mean, in my case, I can tell you, I can no longer remember where I left off and when was the last time I did it and when was it.
I do have those records. I keep them all recorded, so I can let you know what the last one was that you requested.
Well, if you don't file on time, Jim, it turns into taxable income. So be careful.
Least of my problems. Okay. So anything from staff, anything you guys want to tell us or warn us about, or?
I don't have anything in particular.
No warnings that I'm aware of.
Okay. Well, let's certainly hope that the next meeting we're able to meet in person if we want. Yes, I'm tired of winter. I don't know about you guys. All right. Last call for new business. Do we have any new business?
Jim, there's not enough new business, but I just want to point out as we close the meeting that the executive office building is going to be renamed. The Ike Leggett office building in the ceremony that's coming up shortly.
Really?
Looking forward to being there, and it's just it'll be a great occasion and well deserved. Ike Leggett served, of course, for 3 terms as county executive, 3 terms in the county council. He was a great colleague and friend, and it's just it's a wonderful event.
Do you know when that is?
I'm sorry, it's within a short period of time. I don't have my calendar in
It's
front of.
February 24th.
Oh, February, so it's upcoming. Okay.
Okay.
24. I think it's 3 o'clock.
Correct.
Thank you for doing that. I'm sorry, somebody else, I think I cut somebody off. Did somebody else have? I heard a voice. Okay. All right, not hearing for any new business, I will ask for unanimous consent that we adjourn.
Moved.
So moved.
Second.
No objections. We will be considered to be an adjournment. Thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
good day, everyone.
Have a great day.
Ciao.